Now let's work on our orders. Let's make sure we only see orders of our user. And for that, of course, we first of all need to make sure that when we place an order, we attach the user ID. Thankfully, the user ID is stored in our auth slice of the state here, user ID here. So we're storing that already. So we only need to make sure that we also take advantage of this when we place an order. So in our orders action creators, when we purchase a burger, we want to pass the user ID on to the backend. So it should be part of the order data, I'd say. That, however, is set in our contact data container. There in the order handler, we in the end dispatch on order burger. We call this function which dispatches the action. And there we set up our order data. This is where I also want to add the user ID. Now, since we store that in our Redux store, that's super easy to do. We can just get it from there. So in map state to props in the contact data container, I'll add a user ID prop and reach out to state of user ID like this. Now we can use that prop anywhere in this component. For example, when we do submit an order. So in the order handler, here where we set up the order, there we can simply add another property, and that is our user ID property, which is this props user ID, this newly mapped prop. And that should be all. With that, if I now place an order, let's quickly try this out. Let's order this delicious burger, continue, and fill this out. So once this is filled out here and we click order, this all seems to work. Let's now have a look at our backend. The order was added, and there we see that in the, not in the order data, but here on the main element itself, we have user ID, which is our user ID. So now that order is mapped to our user. Now, of course, we also want to make sure that when we visit orders, we only see orders of that user. Now, there are two ways of checking this. One is on the front end, because the data we get back from the backend will hold this information. We can see this if we inspect our state here for fetch orders success. Order, this orders array. The last order, which is the most recent one, has this user ID property. So we could check if that user ID matches the ID of the logged in user. But we would still fetch all orders. And that's a potential security issue, because if anyone inspects our JavaScript code, he could see orders which aren't meant for him. So a better way is to just fetch the orders we need from the backend in the first place. And we can do that easily with Firebase. Of course, for your own API, you need some way of passing that user ID to the backend, or use that token you pass along anyways to only fetch data for a given user. When using Firebase, you can easily filter data by going back to your async orders action creator file. And there where we have fetch orders, we already passed the token. We can pass more query params here. And since I will add more, I'll actually add a new constant here. And I'll name this query params. And this will just be a string where I have auth equal to token. And then I'll change some other query parameter with an and sign. This will be order by with a capital B. That is a query parameter understood by Firebase, which allows us to, well, order our data. Now, I don't actually want to reorder it, but this also tells Firebase, hey, you can filter by that. So I want to order by my user ID property. And now we can chain another query parameter, and that is equal to. This always refers to the key you're ordering by. So we can say we want to order by that user ID property on our Firebase data. And we only want to fetch the data where this key, user ID, is equal to, and now we need to get the user ID here. So I expect to get it. We could, of course, also get it with that get state argument we can retrieve here, but I don't want to use that. Instead, I expect to get the user ID here as an argument. And then here, at my URL, I replace the current code at the end by simply attaching my query params constant now, which holds all the query params. So let's make sure we get the user ID then. To do that, I need to go to the place where we execute fetch orders or where we dispatch this action. And that of course happens in the orders container. There, this props on fetch orders is used. Here, I now simply need to get the user ID. So let's add it to our props and get it from the state, from the auth state. There it's in a user ID property, as you can always check in your reducer. And I need to be able to dispatch my action with that ID. So there I pass an additional argument and pass it on to the action creator, because we just added this action creator to expect this argument. And then we have to pass it on in our container code too. Here I also pass this props user ID like this. And that should be all. Now if we go back to our application and we go back to orders, I actually get an error because I have a tiny syntax error in our orders action creator. Order by, the value or the property name by which you want to order should be enclosed in quotation marks, in double quotation marks. Now that's not the only change though. The value we're passing here, if it's a string and user ID is a string, also needs to be wrapped with double quotation marks. So let's add one in front of our variable and then one thereafter between the single quotation marks because it's still text. With that, we've done almost everything, but we also need to prepare it on the back end. Here in Firebase, and that's just Firebase specific because we, happen to use Firebase here. If you want to be able to filter data, we have to adjust our rules to make a certain field indexable so that Firebase can search through it. This is done in your rules tab on the database. There we can simply go to orders and we have read and write there. And now we add another rule, .indexOn, and it's of course important that you write this correctly with a dot at the beginning and a capital O. And now you can add an array of all the fields you want to make searchable. Here it's only user ID though. Now let's publish that. And now with that in place and our code here updated too and everything saved, if we go back to the burger and we are logged in, we go to orders, we see only one order now. And that should be our order. Let's confirm by creating the bacon bomb burger here. Salad, always important. So let's order this now. If I click order and now go to orders, we see that here too. So now we only get the data and we have no chance of accessing data that doesn't belong to our user. Now this example is of course only showing this with Firebase, but on your own backend, you probably have your own filtering logic, either returning only user-related data from the server anyways by checking the token you pass along, or by also giving you some query functionality as we used it here.